1. My dad is from Bolivia, specifically from the town of Cochabamba. Our family's European ancestors have supposedly been in the area for a few hundred years. We also have some Quichua and Aymara blood, which are the two main indigenous groups in the area, though I'm not quite sure how much. My paternal grandparents met in Argentina, where my grandmother is from, and married after a 5-year engagement. When they moved back to Bolivia, they moved to a house quite a ways out of town. My grandfather's work was not far away, but my grandmother needed to stay in town with my family during the week for her job. When she was gone, things were pretty calm in the house, but on the weekends things would become aggressive. As in, things would be thrown at my grandmother when she was alone in a room without my grandfather or the maid, and other things like that. Eventually it got so bad that my grandparents hired a shaman to deal with it. The shaman determined that it was a female spirit who felt jealous of my grandmother, because the spirit had taken a liking to my grandfather. He performed a ceremony to calm the activity and prevent the spirit from following them if they moved. Things calmed down, and the spirit supposedly didn't follow them after they moved. But that wasn't the only female spirit to bother my family. After having 6 children, my grandparents bought a lot of land and built a 3-bedroom home. One for the parents, and one for the 2 boys, and one for the 4 girls. The house still exists, along with a smaller house that my grandparents built after the kids moved out, so they could rent out the bigger home. When it was just the big house, my father was apparently tormented by the spirit of a woman dressed in white. She would apparently sit on his chest, stand in doorways, and apparently chase him when he would get up in the middle of the night to pee. No one but my dad saw her when he was a kid. Not even my uncle, who shared his room, though my uncle was once pulled from the bed with the door locked from inside, and my dad at a friend's house. I apparently once woke up an older cousin while sleeping in the home, asking if I could sleep with her because there was a lady in my room who wouldn't let me sleep. I had been in my dad's room and my cousin in our aunt's room. I was supposedly completely calm, but my cousin was practically shitting bricks because my little sister was alone in the room I had left. People who rented the home also had experiences. My grandparents did long-term rentals, no Airbnb stuff, and there were a couple of times when they were woken up in the middle of the night by the renters, begging to be let out of their lease because the spirits were being so active. I don't know if any of them saw the woman, but I know that a man who appeared in a mirror and a young boy have been reported. We are the only family to have built or lived on that land in recent memory, and no bones were found when either house was built, though neither have a basement. In the big house, I also heard my name called several times during a visit in 2015, when I was alone in the home. Neither of my aunts were there, or my cousins, or the cleaning lady that we had come in multiple times a week. During the same trip, I saw a white mist twice, once in the house during the day going into the dining room, and once outside the home at night, moving past a window. Both homes may not be around much longer, since both my grandparents have passed, and the 6 siblings are considering knocking them down and building an apartment building, with each sibling who wants one getting an apartment. The thought makes me sad, since I love these homes due to all the happy memories, but there are reasons why they want to go that route. 2. My grandparents purchased a small home in a 3-bar, 1-church town in the 1980s. The house was built in the early 1800s, and can better be described as a 1-bedroom cabin. It had a 1-car garage that was later converted into a bedroom. We would visit my grandparents every weekend. The house in general had a handful of weird things going on, paranormal, which I will get into in other posts. They had a massive garden, and they were pretty heavy drinkers. My grandma, a bartender for 40 years, at the same bar pretty much next door to the house. My grandpa was a general laborer. My grandpa passed away in '96 of lung cancer, and my grandma continued to live in the house as a widow until she was no longer able to live on her own. While he was living after a night of drinking, both Friday and Saturday nights, my grandpa would wake up first and race everyone to the bathroom. He would take a 2-hour shit shower and shave, and leave the tiny bathroom with a strong, misty smell of aqua velva aftershave, which covered every bit of any other bathroom smell that would have been coming from the tiny bathroom. Many mornings I would consider the punishment for squatting on the tree outside to pee, because I had to go so bad. I'm a girl, by the way. The water ran very hot, and the handles were pretty hard to turn due to age and mineral buildup. About 5 years after he died, my sister and I were building card houses on the living room floor, which connects to the tiny bathroom. The hot water turned on in the sink full blast. I always had trouble turning the water on by myself, even in middle school, which is when this happened. My sister and I looked at one another and our jaws dropped. We ran to get my mother to turn the water off. She crept in, and tears started streaming down her cheeks. She called us in and asked, "Do you smell that?" I had not smelled the Aquavelva aftershave in years. It was an intense experience that really cannot be explained to me in any way. 3. When I was 5, 22 years ago, my granddad Tony died. A few things about my granddad. He smoked really strong tobacco, and my mum would tell him off for smoking in the house. He also loved to wind my mum up by moving her wedding photo, which was hung above the fire. Anyway, odd things started to happen about a year after he died. We would all smell his tobacco when we woke up in the morning. And when we came downstairs, my mum's wedding photo would be on the wonk. Also, when his favorite football game was playing, our TV would change channel when his team scored. We weren't overly concerned, and we have always believed in spirits. We would come downstairs in the morning and greet our granddad as if he were sitting at the table. This continued until me and my sisters moved out. My mum moved not long after we moved out. We never actually saw him, though. Fast forward 22 years and I have a daughter of my own, and she is 8. The other evening I was in my bedroom and my daughter was supposed to be asleep. But I heard her talking. I got up to investigate, and as I got to her room I saw her sitting up in bed chatting away and explaining what she had done at school that day. I asked her who she was speaking to, and she said she was talking to Tony. It took me a couple of seconds to process what she had said. Obviously, I was only 5 when my granddad passed away, so he clearly never got a chance to meet my daughter. I didn't say anything about who she was talking to. I stroked her head and told her she had school in the morning, and to go to sleep. I looked at the end of the bed where she was facing and did not see anyone. I'm not going to lie and say I wasn't disappointed. The next morning, I got down a photo of my granddad. Now, my daughter has never seen a photo of my granddad. These are all kept in a box on top of my wardrobe. I didn't say anything to my daughter, just left the photo out on the kitchen table. She sat down for breakfast and let out a little squeal. She held up the photo of my granddad and said, "This is Tony. He comes to see me sometimes and asks about school. He loves it when we talk about books." It's strange, but I am extremely comforted by the fact that Granddad is still watching over us, and even watching over his great-granddaughter too. 4. Several years ago I went to Salem, Massachusetts. I had a strange experience there that I can't explain. I was 26 at the time and traveling with another adult. We had been walking around town that morning and saw an advertisement for a play that would be taking place that afternoon. It's a play about Bridget Bishop. She was accused of witchcraft and executed in 1692. The play starts off outside in the street where the actress Bridget gets arrested. The actors lead the attendees down to the old town hall for her trial. I had been feeling great that day, no physical issues, until a few minutes after we entered the old town hall. We were escorted to the second floor. We sat down waiting for the play to start. Suddenly I felt horrible. I started sweating profusely. It was mid-October, jacket weather. My vision was blurry and I couldn't focus on anything. My head felt like it was about to explode. However, the worst thing was the excruciating pressure and pain in my neck. I felt like I was being strangled. I have never experienced anything like this before or since. I felt like my life was just being drained from me. I remember thinking, oh man, either I'm having a stroke or an aneurysm or something. I didn't mention anything to the person I was with at the time, as I figured the symptoms would resolve quickly. For some reason, in my hazy and confused state, I thought the most logical thing to do was to check my watch to see what time it was, in case it was something medically serious. It was 3 p.m. For a moment, I thought maybe I should step outside for some air, but I decided to stay for the play and see how I felt. The play had started by this point, and I still wasn't feeling right. All the symptoms I was experiencing continued throughout the duration of the play. I just kept feeling such pressure and pain in my neck, and wishing this horrible feeling would cease. After the play had ended, I rushed out of the building as fast as I could. I didn't wait for the person I was with. The minute I exited the building, I felt completely fine. The pressure in my neck, the dizziness, the strangling feeling, all gone the minute I stepped outside. I felt fine the rest of the day, and for the duration of the trip. The following day we went on a walking tour, and as we were approaching the current Salem Town Hall, the guide informs us that the area we were currently standing in was the site of the jail during the 1692 trials. He said that the sheriff at the time was a particularly nasty individual and would beat and torture the prisoners daily. At the same time every day at 3 p.m., same time my symptoms started the previous day. The hair on my arms stood up. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I don't know what any of this all means. It was a strange experience. I hadn't experienced anything like this prior, nor have I experienced anything like this since. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. I'd love to hear any thoughts and or opinions regarding this experience. 5. This story starts at my semi-childhood home. I didn't spend my entire childhood at this home, mainly just my middle school and high school years. Some of my oldest memories are of paranormal experiences as a small child, and because of this I've always considered myself more susceptible to paranormal experiences. It's just been a part of me for so long. This particular house my mom, 2 brothers and I moved into the summer after my dad had left us. Everyone was still a wreck over him leaving, especially Mom, who now had to support 3 kids while working a minimum wage job. It had been a hard summer, one of the hardest in my life. Moving into this house was supposed to be a fresh start for us. We were going to live in a house that didn't remind us of him at every turn and corner. It was supposed to be a good thing. My mother and I took a tour of the house a couple weeks before we moved in. It was a cute brown house with a huge fenced-in yard for the dogs to play in. The house was in a small subdivision on the corner. Didn't know this before we moved in, but this house was actually one of the first ones built in this subdivision. The inside was very basic, as any cheap house would be. The day we moved in was the day I immediately realized that we weren't the only ones in the house. It was like the air was just heavy all the time. Walking into the house automatically put you into a bad mood. Like I said, I've had paranormal experiences before, so I just knew. Despite me being a huge believer in the paranormal, my mother is probably the biggest skeptic you could ever come across. My mom worked long hours and my brothers had visitation with my dad on weekends, so I spent the majority of my time alone. To combat the loneliness, I would clean. It wasn't the most fun thing a teenager could do, but it kept me busy, which in turn helped me not to think about my dad. It wasn't a new house, so there was plenty to do. One of the first experiences I had that really set it in stone that this place had something funky going on was when I had just finished cleaning the kitchen. My mother's room was right off the kitchen and had given me the creeps since day one. As most people do, I listened to music as I cleaned. As soon as I took my headphones out, I heard noises, kind of like someone going through something in a plastic bag. The sound was coming from my mother's room. Her door was always kept closed because she didn't like our animals to be in her room. I didn't really want to investigate considering this was an old house. I was imagining all kinds of animals that might have gotten into her room, and the thought of opening the door for it to come after me was enough for me to just ignore it. As I had finished cleaning the kitchen, I grabbed a Febreze ready to spray every room I had just cleaned. I figured I would go ahead and spray my mom's room since she hadn't had time to clean it yet. I opened the door and mindlessly started spraying, and as I did, the droplets of air freshener caught to an invisible figure in front of me. I froze, not knowing how to act or what to do in this situation. The figure clearly made out the shape of a human body, but it wasn't there. I quickly just slammed the door, not wanting to see or know more. When we first moved in, we had 2 dogs. One was a sweet basset hound that sadly passed a few months after we moved in. Our other dog was a rambunctious min-pin puppy that kept us on our feet. We later rescued a kitten that was going to be put down. Everyone has always said that animals can sense entities better than humans, and I've always known this to be true. Our Basset was an outside dog, but occasionally liked to come in to lay on the cold tile to cool off. As soon as we moved to this house, she would refuse to come in. If we forced her in, she would huddle in corners and howl and bark until we let her back out. This was bizarre to us, because she was such a calm dog. Bassets are known for being lazy, but inside this house, she did all she possibly could to get out. Our puppy had never been the type to be aggressive over anything, but at this house she would growl at nothing and stare at corners of the walls for hours, with the hair on her back standing up. She slept with me at night, and would frequently get up in the middle of the night and stand at the end of my bed, growling at the wall. This wall she would growl at was also the same wall that I've caught the most proof that this house is something more than just us. Our sweet little kitty would walk around at night, meowing and having conversations with what seemed like himself. After a while, the whole idea of us being haunted just became a joke at the dinner table. Mom met someone new, and he soon moved in. He was a believer in the paranormal, but still joked about it with us. We thought it would be funny to name our ghosts, so we did. All of our animals' names had something to do with a kind of alcohol. Thinking it would be funny to name our ghost the same as our pets, she became known as Hennessy. Every time we would hear a noise or footsteps, everyone would yell, "Do you hear it? Hennessy is back again," or something along those lines. The way I always know that Hennessy had made her arrival is my stomach will start hurting ever so slightly. Not enough to have me rolling in pain, just enough to know she's near. One night I was in my bed watching TV, when I felt that slight pain in my stomach. I knew that meant she was near and went on Snapchat to tell my friends who didn't believe me. I took a pic of me with the flash on saying how my stomach was hurting, and in the background you can clearly see the figure of someone with glowing eyes. If you stared long enough, you could even see the outline of hair. The thing is, the background of that photo was a plain wall. It had no decor or anything on it. I turned up the contrast on my phone so it made it more visible, and sent the photo to all my friends. To this day, everyone still gets stomach aches when they see the picture. Edit. I can't believe I actually forgot to mention this. But a few weeks after we moved in, we were outside doing yard work when one of our neighbors walked over to introduce themselves. They started talking about how the house had been vacant since the 80s, and the previous owners were very odd people. We got curious and asked what they meant, since we really didn't want anything weird to happen at this house. They told us that the previous owners was a family of 3, a mother, father, and a daughter. The daughter was born with some mental issues, they didn't specify what kind. She loved riding her bike, and every day would go out riding bikes for most of the day. One day time got away from her, and it had turned dark. She was on these small and dark back roads riding her bike home, when a car came by and hit her. I was told that the girl sat in the ditch after the car hit her all night, because she couldn't move. When they found her in the morning, she had sadly passed away. Her bike was laying crumpled up in the road. I always thought that the reason the parents moved away was because Hennessy, or whatever her real name was, had already taken her place in the house, and seeing their daughter like that was too much. They moved out within a couple of months. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 95. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'll keep the outro fairly short, but this is Friday, so we'll have another installment of Film Fridays with Hellfreezer before I go. Only had time to watch one film this week so far, and it's called Hush. It came out in 2016. It stars a woman named Kate Siegel, and other people also, but she's the star of it. She also wrote the film. I believe she and her husband, Mike Flanagan, they wrote it together, and he's the director. And it's about a woman named Maddie, and she's deaf and mute, right? Hence the title, Hush. And she's just doing her thing. She's at home. She's a writer, so and we're introduced into her world. And she lives kind of reasonably away from people, but not like super duper away. She does have like a neighbor, a friendly neighbor we meet quite early on in the film. They're obviously quite good friends. And events transpire that there is a serial killer on the loose. And I won't say much more than that, but obviously the story of the film is how Mary deals with this very bad person who's decided she'll be his next victim. And it looks like Netflix is a worldwide distributor for that if you want to track it down. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.